In the meantime, though, we do want to keep bringing in so many experts and analysts to help us make sense of what to expect tonight during this debate. We're going to do that right now with our friends, political analyst Brian Sobel and former Democratic Congresswoman Cheri Bustos. They join me. Thanks so much for being with us here. This is quite something, quite unprecedented. It's early. We've been talking about how early it is. You know, Cheri, to you, you know your way around debates. You've been in debates yourself before. What are going through these candidates' minds right now? If we could put ourselves in their psyches, what are they thinking and how are they preparing?
Oh, it's a high-stress moment. I remember we would practice debate sessions. You know, you'd have somebody stand in as your opponent. We would actually go over to a college and use their podiums, and we'd have people playing the opponent. We'd have people out in the audience. But no, I mean, this is a high-stress time for both of them, and I think there's a lot at stake here. And you know, I'm sure they've got a lot of butterflies. And you know, what are we? We're just about 25 minutes off or so. So we'll see how it all goes here very soon.
Brian, to that point, high stress for anyone who would be in this position. But let's just be real and frank about this. These men are old. Biden's 81. Trump is 78. Does that amplify that question about the stress level of tonight?
Well, it's probably a little bit of a matter of stamina. It's
Okay.
90 minutes long, and you know, they've got all those rules that you just went over.
Yeah.
But luckily for them, they have a couple breaks, so they'll be able to maybe go to the restroom if they need to do that. But you know, they agreed to these rules going into it.
Sure.
And you know, that was always a critical part. Our teams setting those rules in advance. So you want to have those so they benefit you the most. I'm always better earlier in the evening than I am late. I'm a very early riser, so we would want to have our debates earlier. But you know, it's going to be 9 o'clock Eastern for these guys. And again, 81 years old, and Trump, by the way, is only 3 years younger. And yeah, so I think it'll be a little bit of a matter of how does their stamina hold out in this 90-minute debate.
Yeah, you know, I've been hearing that a lot from, you know, people on social media, my friends, my family. They're asking, you know, why is the debate so late, 9 p.m. Eastern? You know, Brian, to that question, the age-old question, no pun intended, about mental fortitude, mental aptitude, physical and mental fitness for the most stressful and important job in the world. How much is that going to be at play here tonight, Brian?
It's a huge factor. You know, the discussion about age is important. You have two elderly, by most people's definition, people going after each other. It's the first debate in American history where a former president is debating a sitting current president. There's a lot at stake. It is high tension. It will be a question of 90 minutes, and the rules are restrictive enough that both of these candidates are going to have to debate based on things they have rehearsed and dealt with. And that's that whole list of issues that we know are important to the American people. And so we will see, as these two trade it tonight, who is on top of the facts and who delivers in a way that will connect with the very thin number of people in America who don't lean one way or the other pretty strongly.
You know, Cheri,
I was going to say, this is a race about picking up votes of independents and others who haven't made up their mind yet.
Yeah, you know, Cheri and Brian too, I mean, you're students of American history. Can you remember a time when a debate mattered as much as this between what is being described as two incumbents? Of course, Biden is the incumbent because he's president now, but Trump is a former president. He is the leader of the Republican Party. So that dynamic, I think, is so interesting here. You know, and you can make the argument, you know, who is the underdog, who's on top, who's going in with the momentum. How do you make those arguments when they're both really incumbents, Cheri?
Well, I've always felt that these debates are high stakes. I was at the Biden-Trump debate 4 years ago. I was at the Hillary-Trump debate 4 years before that. The one where Rudy Giuliani brings out the women, and I was sitting right behind them. I just remember the drama associated with that. But look, I think these are always high stakes. This day and age, these races are close. I also remember when President Obama bombed his first debate, and as Democrats, we were all sweating it. And you also think when you're running for Congress, as I did 5 times, and in fact, I ran as a Democrat in the Trump district. And, so you always kind of think, okay, how's this going to impact the down ballot races? So there's just, like I said, I think they're always high stakes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Brian, I wanted to ask.
Going back into history, sure. They have been since the televised debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. Right. And there are all these moments since that time that we look back at. I think back as we study the modern debate era of George Herbert Walker Bush looking at his watch while Bill Clinton is connecting with the audience on the economy in that debate, or George W. Bush. Feeling like Gore had gotten into his space, and he kind of gave him the nod like a guy does on a high school, yard. But the eye rolling, all of the body mannerisms and everything else are just studied and looked at by people way more now than they have been in the past.
And you can make the argument too. Maybe you guys agree with me that those moments, the body language, the fixed stares. The body language, the very personal moments are remembered in history rather than substantive policy points as well. If we can go back to 2012 between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama, the comment by Barack Obama about Russia as a threat, I think everyone remembers that. But as far as policy is concerned, people remember the personal showbiz element moments to these debates. That is what you just referred to, Brian. So if there's going to be a moment like that tonight, and we're going to be talking about it maybe till the next debate in September, are they make or break, Sherry? Say Biden does something, say he forgets someone's name. Is that an element in the Biden campaign where there's this zero-sum factor that, it's over? Are there going to be moments like that?
Well, you don't know what's going to happen over these 90 minutes, but a very strong performance will be important for President Biden. I know we've all read that he's been at Camp David. He's been preparing. I like how Donald Trump said he's out in a cabin, or, he's in a bunker, his description. And even the Trump campaign trying to manage expectations and all of a sudden how they used to make fun of President Biden. And now they're saying he's a good debater. They're trying to manage those expectations. But no, I think that as we look at tonight, again, I see this as a performance that has to be very, very strong. And I have no doubt that Donald Trump will throw out misstatements. We will see how the moderators handle that. I also have no doubt that President Biden, his sympathy and his empathy for Americans who struggle, I think that will come through strongly. And I think we can expect the questions that will be out there about abortion, about Roe versus Wade, about the economy, about crime, about the border, about will President Trump accept the results of this election? I think if I were to throw out a question, what I would want to ask Donald Trump is, should Roe versus Wade be enshrined in law by the Congress and ban abortions nationwide? Will he sign that? Okay. Because it is a very sensitive issue right now. And I think that's a question that's fair. And I would love to hear the answer to that.
So, Brian, you talk about issues as well. How much do you think the 2020 election will be front and center in this debate in 2024? I mean, if you're Jake Tapper and you're Dana Bash, do you have to ask about 2020? Do you have to ask about the January 6th Capitol riot or not? Brian?
Well, I think in 90 minutes, that has to come up at some point. And Donald Trump has to answer, and his answer's on the record. And people are looking for what typically drives presidential elections, and that's issues of the economy. Yes, immigration is going to be talked about, and abortion, and the fentanyl crisis, and crime in the cities, and homelessness. And, over 90 minutes, you're going to see a lot of these things talked about. But eventually, people always come back to the wallet. If you think about this, when George Herbert Walker Bush faced this little-known governor from Arkansas, nobody took on that race against Bush because he was so popular, had a huge approval rating at that time. Clinton moved ahead, took him on. Remember, it's the economy. It was all about the economy. And so even though Bush had performed well as commander-in-chief in a military operation, people said, hey, I can't afford the groceries. And we're looking around the country, and that is an issue for people. So that's going to be a major factor. So I think President Biden has to answer the question, and he will, about the economy. And he's going to cite, and you're going to hear all kinds of metrics tonight.
Yeah.
And he's going to cite the fact that the economy has been doing better in recent days and he's going to say it's because of my administration. And Donald Trump's going to come back and say it's been a disaster. Probably use that word for 3 years. And so you're going to see this back and forth, but people are going to be listening very closely to answers around the economy in particular, along with these other issues.
You know, Sherry and Brian, aside from the incumbent question, which I think is really interesting, the last time these two men faced off in 2020, it was late September, Biden didn't have a record. Trump was the only candidate that had a record. And now both of their records as president will be put against each other. So I thought that was really interesting as well here. But Sherry, you want to talk about some of the tawdry details of the news cycle around some of these debates? You remember back in 2020, you know, there was allegations put out by the Trump camp that Biden was going to have an earpiece, that he was going to be taking performance-enhancing drugs. We still have that kind of same mini conversation around these debates going into tonight as well. So will civility come back tonight, or is it gone for good?
Oh, gosh. You know, the cutting off of the mics when the other person is not speaking, I think is probably a pretty positive thing. Again, to be there in person and witness how Donald Trump was hovering over Hillary Clinton. I was there watching that in person and just in disbelief to be there in person and listen to Donald Trump just shouting over not just Joe Biden, but also the moderator. So I think that's a blessing that will force some civility. But again, you know, we're 15 minutes off or so from the start of this, and I think by the end of those 90 minutes, we'll have a little more clarity about this. But look, I think this is, if you have any interest in politics and in American government, this is must-watch TV tonight. It'll be interesting to see what the ratings are, but I am just very interested in seeing what comes out of this. Will it be civil? Will it not?
Yeah.
It's hard for a guy like Donald Trump to constrain himself because he's not known one bit for his civility.
Okay, Brian, to that point, though, the audience question. I'm curious, are you pro-audience or anti-audience? What are the benefits or disadvantages of either question? Where do you fall on the audience question?
Well, I think if you have an audience, you have the energy that's in the room. I've debated many times. There's a lot of energy. You feed off the energy. I think Sherry would acknowledge that, or maybe agree. And it just gives a vibrancy to the debate. On the other hand, when you're in a room with a couple of moderators and you're not playing to the audience, you have to maybe behave yourself a little bit more. And I think it's correct to say we're going to watch very early how these two people face off, especially with two moderators and these other rules around the microphone and that sort of thing. But, you know, there's pluses and minuses. You go back and, you know, I do a lot of work with history, and you go back to that Kennedy-Nixon debate, first time on television, and Nixon is sweating profusely, and the hot lights are bothering him, and Kennedy, cool as a cucumber. It made a big difference because if you go back and look, people who were polled after that debate, if they heard the radio debate, Nixon won that.
Sure.
If you polled him on the television debate, Kennedy won it.
Yeah.
So, you know, these are all interesting sidebars.
Definitely. We've got to go. Well, speaking of sidebars, too, it's not just the debate itself. A lot of questions are swirling in the political atmosphere as well tonight. Who will Donald Trump pick as his running mate? Also, the RFK Jr. question. He's doing his own counter-programming event tonight. It seems like the Trump and Biden camps have neutralized the third-party threat, at least for one night here. But we got to leave it at that. We got to go. Brian Sobel, Cheri Bustos, can't thank you enough. Have a good debate night.
Thanks, Andrew.
Absolutely.